Daniel Bennett, welcome to the Jazz Podcast.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. You are coming to London in a couple of weeks for your London album launch.
We are. We're going to be there on November 18th and 19th at Ronnie Scott's, and we have a brand new album out, so we're really excited. The album is called We Are the Orchestra, which is kind of a funny name because the album was actually recorded with just 2 musicians, but we overdubbed 16 instruments, if you can believe that.
That's amazing.
I recorded. It's pretty insane. And the funny thing, Rob, we thought we would save money by having fewer musicians. We actually spent more money because we were in the studio all the time overdubbing every instrument. So I recorded all the wind instruments, saxophone, flute, clarinet, oboe, and Mark Cocchio, a really renowned guitar player, came in and recorded all the string parts, guitar, mandolin, bass, banjo. And the show, actually, we had worked together on a theater production called Whitman at the Whitney Museum in New York City. So Mark and I know each other really well. And my producer encouraged me to do an album from the show, but to keep it in the spirit of the show where there's only 2 musicians. So that's my long story. But although I should tell you, when we're in London, we're going to have a trio, and it'll be slightly different musicians. I'll be joined by Nat Janoff, equally renowned guitar player, and Coco Bermejo on the drums. If you're a drummer, you should be named Coco. It's a great name.
Yeah, that reminds me of Seinfeld. I don't know if you ever...
Oh, yes. Of course, I love Seinfeld.
Yeah. So was there a certain, tell me about the show quickly. I read about a show that you're doing that's totally improvised.
Yeah, that's a big part of what I do in my group. My group is very theatrical, at least the way that I compose and conceive my music. So every week I play in a show called Blank the Musical in New York City. It's an improvised musical. It's called Blank the Musical because it's literally a blank slate. The audience creates a show on their smartphone. They vote. It's like musical Mad Libs. The audience has all these questions and they answer, what the plot of the show, the dance number, the dance style, certain lines of dialogue. So the audience is voting before the show. And then the cast and the band has to take the voting results and create a show on the spot. So it's wild, Rob. It's hilarious.
Sounds amazing.
It's really wild. So it was originally a joint production of Second City in Chicago and Upright Citizens Brigade in New York. So these are some of the best comedic improvisers in the world. These people can get on stage and just be funny instantly and tell a story. And you would think that this was a full show that was written, but it's not. So they're singing on the spot. The pianist is playing, chords and song forms, but it's all made up. And my job as a woodwind player is to just fit my sound into the group as if my part has been written out to make it feel like it's a Broadway show. So it's really wild. It's fun. It's really hilarious stuff.
It sounds like a really interesting way to have to improvise, to not make it sound heavily improvised, but make it sound like it's been written.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, that in and of itself is a challenge. And I tell you, they don't want, as a woodwind player, they don't want me to play jazz licks. They don't want to hear that. They don't want it to sound like I'm just riffing. They want it to feel like it has been composed. So I've got my clarinet, sax, flute. I've got just for different colors and sounds, but they want it to feel like it's a legit show.
Yeah.
Which it's not, but it is. The show actually, speaking of Seinfeld, a show about nothing or a show that's made up. That's what this is.
Yeah.
And the show got a great review in the New York Times, and it's been featured on CNBC and a lot of great media because it's just so bizarre and it's so fun. And, we've done it for a long time, so we have figured out how to make it work. So it's fun to do.
And that's amazing. Is that show connected to the We Are the Orchestra? Sorry,
Yeah, no. It's a good question. It's connected, at least in my own mind, in my own twisted mind. So a lot of the concepts from the show I use on the album. In fact, there's a song on the album called "I'm Not Nancy," which was actually a show title in Blank the Musical. So Blank the Musical, the name of the show is different every time we do it. So that was actually one of the show the names of one of our shows. So, We're the Orchestra is a lot of things. It's got the comedy element. It's got some pretty serious opera excerpts from 18th and 19th century opera, Verdi and other composers, set to woodwinds and banjo and all this other stuff. So it's hard to describe, and I often tell people I rarely describe my music. I just let the audience interpret freely. There's usually a story behind it, but people don't always want to hear the long-winded stories. They just want to listen to the music and sort of interpret on their own.
Yeah, that's really interesting because we started the show with the theme from Ronnie.
Yeah.
So the Verdi connection, because he composed that melody.
Yeah.
How did they come into the picture?
Well, so when we did Whitman at the Whitney, it's a theater show about Walt Whitman, the poetry of Walt Whitman. It's all of his poetry, well, a lot of it, not all of it, but set to music. And surprisingly, Walt Whitman was a huge fan of opera. So we're talking, the mid 1800s, the Civil War in America is going on. This is like a heavy time. And he would use opera almost as his own kind of escape. So he was a big fan of European opera. And he also loved American bluegrass and folk. So on that particular show, we blended opera and classical opera themes and folk music. So that's the short answer.
Oh, great. I mean, Verdi's it's so good. It's a great idea to sort of borrow these ideas, I think, and
it was fun. It's a challenge, and I'm sure you know this too as a fellow saxophonist. It's not always easy to make these melodies come to life on a saxophone. Sometimes it can feel a little bit contrived or a little bit hokey, kind of strange. But certain melodies really do work on the instrument.
Yeah, it's such a good point because I was reading a review yesterday of a contemporary classical saxophone, like a BBC prom that had just happened, and the reviewer was making the point that it's really common for us to play pieces that were not originally written for our instrument, things that are written for oboe or violin, cello, but I've kind of gotten so used to that I'd stopped thinking about it. And then when I read that review, I was like, that's really weird, this guy cares about it, but I don't, I just sort of, I don't know, it's a saxophone, we don't have as much music in our instrument's history. So.
Definitely. I totally agree. We don't think about it anymore as reed players. If it's got a beautiful melody, you can sell it. You can sell it on any instrument. I mean, when I was in music school, I was playing Rachmaninoff transcriptions, Mozart. I mean, I'm sure you do all that. I mean, just anything that has a great melody that can adapt itself to the horn is going to be great.
Yeah. So tell us about your upbringing then. Like you mentioned that music school. Tell our lovely listeners a bit about how you've gotten to where we are today.
Yeah, I grew up in a really small town in Rochester, New York, which is it's about 6 hours from New York City, really not close at all to New York City. So I had a different kind of exposure to music than I do now living in New York. But I, like most kids around the world, played in bands, marching bands, jazz groups, just, as anything I could get my hands on. I was playing music all the time. I was writing music in high school. I taught myself guitar along the way. I was trying a lot of different instruments. My band director wanted me to play trumpet, but I had a horrible embouchure for trumpet. So when I was a kid, you could pick your top 3 choices for your band instrument. So I picked saxophone.
Nice.
So that's, I knew at a young age, that's what I wanted to do. But like a lot of us, all of us in our age bracket, I grew up listening to rock music, folk music. My parents are big fans of, folk rock, Peter, Paul and Mary, Simon and Garfunkel. I just was exposed to a lot of that stuff, Pete Seeger, Arlo Guthrie. And I always wanted to somehow play the saxophone more like a folk instrument. And I'm getting closer to that. I wouldn't say that I'm there yet, but it's a goal of mine, is to treat the saxophone like a simple folk instrument and get away from the complexity that we can sometimes get stuck in. So I did all that. I moved to Boston in my early 20s, went to the New England Conservatory, stayed in Boston for a long time. I was playing, touring, writing music, recording albums. I was producing music festivals. I had a record label. I was wearing a lot of hats, which looking back on it was very stressful time for me, but I learned a lot. I'm glad I did it. I think it's important to just learn every aspect of the music business. So I was booking 3 different jazz venues in Boston, including, in booking other groups, but also my own group. I mean, ultimately the goal was I wanted to get my own group out there. So that's how I learned how to negotiate contracts and tour and travel. I mean, it was all just self-taught. Like most of us, I guess. I'm sure you're the same way. You pick up a lot of things just on the road in real life.
Yeah, someone asked me once about my interview training, and whether I thought of it as like a double, like another instrument. And I was like, training? What? It's like,
that's great.
Yeah.
No, a wise man once told me, you do it and then you figure it out. That's the secret to life, isn't it? It's just, yep, you do it, and you're doing it. You guys have interviewed a lot of great people. I was listening to your show the other day, and you figured out a way how to tap into the minds of musicians because you're a musician. So this is, in a way, I mean, I know you're working at it, but it sounds easy. You make it sound easy just listening to your interviews. So
that's a relief.
I can see. No, yeah, it definitely sounds easy. Mission accomplished. It really does. It really does.
I think the main thing for me in making a show is that I just ask questions that I find interesting, and without trying to read too much in advance, because I don't want to know all the answers and then make assumptions, and I guess whenever anyone's working in any medium they find interesting, then already you're like halfway there,
Oh, yeah.
And then,
I agree. I mean, the same can be said for reading your audience. Like I was saying, I really don't try to tell people what my music is or describe my own music. I just let the audience interpret it. And we're finally in a period in music where we can do that boldly, and it's kind of embraced now because with the internet, people are exploring things on their own. I mean, every day I'm messaging with people are hearing my music, and they have their own take on it. And in our concert, we could be playing. When we played we play at a great club in New York every month called Tommy Jazz. We were there last night, and we opened the show with a whole medley of just American folk songs, and then we went into some free jazz and then some kind of fusion stuff. And some of it's planned, some of it's not. So it's fun. The audience, if it's an adventurous audience, they'll go along with you.
What's the Tommy Jazz thing then?
It's a club. It's in Midtown Manhattan. It's a great club. It's a Japanese restaurant and jazz club. And it's like a basement club, kind of like the Village Vanguard. And it's been around. We've been there since the club opened about 10 years ago.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
When we started. Yeah, it's a great club. If you're in New York ever, come play there, and I'll bring a bunch of people out because it's a really nice place, and the food is amazing, and you never know. Jazz clubs anywhere can be an amazing jazz club with really bad food.
Yeah,
but Tommy Jazz really has great food, so thumbs up.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear the Pat Metheny album 8081?
No.
But
tell me about it.
The opening of that album is like a 20-minute long track called Two Folk Songs.
Okay.
It's with Michael Brecker and Dewey Redman, cool. Charlie Hayden, Jack DeJohnette. But I think you probably like it. It's kind of nice, like you said. I'm going to add that to my list. Yeah, it's usually me. I do a lot of list adding during this show. But like you said, they kind of get away from the harmonic complexity a bit of what you kind of get used to listening to jazz. But I like it. It's very different feeling. But it reminded me actually when I was listening to your album before we started, just that feeling of it being a little more. I'm not sure what the word is. Like you said about trying to play more like a folk instrument.
Oh yeah. Yeah, simplicity. It's a beautiful word. I love it. Simplicity is good. Every day I'm trying to move away from complexity and go closer to simple things, simple ideas from my own brain.
What kind of CDs or music was inspiring you then to go that way? Was there stuff that you were hearing that was kind of pushing you down that road?
There's always things that I'm hearing. It's funny you mentioned Pat Metheny, Bright Size Life and some of his early recordings. I got to play a little bit with Bob Moses, the great drummer in Boston, who played on some of Pat Metheny's early albums. And Bob turned me on to some of that early stuff. I also took lessons with Bob, which was interesting as a saxophone player, taking lessons with a drummer. But Bob Moses is one of those guys who can actually bridge the gap and actually speak into a horn player's mind. So.
Yeah.
Pat Metheny, for sure. Bill Frisell. I used to curate and produce a music series in Boston called the Bennett Alliance Music Series, and we had Bill Frisell on the show. Charlie Hunter was another one. I really love guitar players.
Yeah.
I've never recorded an album with piano. It's always with a guitar player. So in my brain, I'm a guitar player. It's funny. Even when I play the saxophone, I like to think like a guitar player.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's all in there. I mean, whatever we're around growing up as kids or whatever, influences are always just kind of floating around in our heads. And I also love the music of Steve Reich and Philip Glass, minimalism, Terry Riley, John Adams. So repetition is fun for me. I like to repeat things, and I think in jazz we're generally terrified of repeating ideas because we always change.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of this too. We're always trying to change the idea and add notes and make it complex. But I love repetition, and I find the audience just zooms right in on you when you repeat something, and especially if you repeat it 5 or 6 times. Because then you're really being brave. It takes a lot of guts, and it takes guts to play simple ideas.
Yeah.
I mean, so the influences are everywhere, I guess. So it's a good question.
Oh man, this is all lighting up, buttons in my brain. This conversation, there's a few Steve Reich pieces that have completely changed my life. There's one called City Life that's recorded in New York, all like street sounds and car horns and. It's a funny one because it's not like hardcore minimalism, but it's so interesting. It's so cool.
It's so cool. It's and of course, he's a drummer by trade, and so he understands the rhythms and his New York counterpoint, 8 lines. Actually, he did an album with Pat. Or I think
that's an electric counterpoint.
That's right.
Yeah.
He did. Yes. So yeah, I'm right there with you. It's the trance element, repeating an idea, there's a bravery in that when you listen to it, and it's just fun. You're pulled in, you're sucked in. It's great.
Yeah, I love when it's a very simple pleasure, but when you leave the harmony static for such a long time and then you move something, it feels so good.
Yeah,
man, I'd love to be Steve Reich. That'd be
Yeah, no, I agree, though. I agree. And isn't it hard as a saxophone player? We have all these keys under our fingers and we just have to play more notes. And we don't have to, but we do. It's quite scary to stay on a single idea. So it's always a challenge for me. I'm not there yet, but I'm always working towards it.
Yeah, wow, it's so interesting. So then let's talk about your decision then to move. I mean, on the one hand, it can't have been a hard one when you decide to move to New York, but what was it like deciding that you were going to leave Boston and make a big change?
It was a lot of work, but I was traveling to New York a lot. I was in both cities. I used to play at a hotel in Boston called the Liberty Hotel. And I would literally take a bus from Boston Chinatown to New York Chinatown to do this gig, and then there was another gig in New York that I was doing. It was just my wife finally said, "Let's just make the move. Let's and we can we'll work it out." We have 2 kids now, but we didn't have kids at that point. So we moved to New York, and we were on the Upper East Side. We're still on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. We had a little apartment right by the East River, and I was working every night, and she still has thankfully a great job that she has on Wall Street that she's done for a while. And we had 2 kids, and life just becomes complicated and complex, but you muscle through it, you pray hard, and you find a way to make it work, like all of us. I mean, London is no different. London has all sorts of challenges that are just built into the city, and New York's the same way, Boston. So every artist has to somehow figure out. I mean, life is basically a big conflict that you have to fix, kind of, or it's broken, and you have to kind of just fix your way through it. And and that's what you do. And you get a lot of musicians you can trust around you, and you learn to market yourself, travel, be well spoken, dress up and be presentable, and find a way to sleep and make it all work.
Yeah. I feel like when you're writing your own music, being like presentable and well spoken is super important.
Yes, it is, because as you and I both know, normal, regular, non-jazz people really are not interested in dealing with a lunatic on the stage. They want to yes, you have to be presentable, because the jazz, I call it the jazz cult. It's a very small jazz world that is not really in line with reality most of the time. The reality is people, club owners and clubs need to make money. Okay, I get that. They need to make money. Audiences need to feel like they're being at least a little bit entertained, to a degree. And artists need to understand that a little bit. Obviously, both sides need to work together, but yeah, being presentable is huge. I learned that when I was booking venues in Boston, when I was a booking manager, that how important it was to, because I had groups that were just horrible with their stage presence, and we just couldn't hire them.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I was taking notes, for my own group. Wow, this works or this doesn't work. So yeah, it's interesting. And then when I was booking this concert series, I was flying artists in from all over the world to be on this series. My group would host it. My band would play a set, and then we would have another group. And, really I was doing it to observe and sort of take notes and understand what works and what doesn't work. So you're right. You have to really be presentable.
Is there anyone when you were running that series that you would see and be like, this is fantastic, this is it, musicians who would show the crowd a fantastic time while playing beautifully as well?
Definitely Charlie Hunter, for sure. Guitar player. I thought Charlie was incredibly well-spoken, well-versed, funny, very professional, but really funny and supportive. Kind of went out of his way to support people around him. Bill Frisell was very professional. Bill's kind of a funny, shy, bashful guy, but very supportive, and has a great heart. I thought he was great. I mean, all of the groups we had on the series, we had kind of vetted, and I knew they were good people. They were either people that I knew in some way, or I had worked with. James Carter did the series once with his trio. He was great. I mean, talk about well-spoken, well-dressed, presentable. I mean, he was very focused, laser focused on stage. It was really fun to watch. But every group is different. I mean, as you know, everyone has a personality, and we all kind of channel it differently. Depending on where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. I think, like Mike Stun was the life lesson for me in like, oh man, he's showing the audience that, he's so funny. He's such a nice guy. And when like he plays at Ronnie Scott's, he will sit in on the band's, the support act and be like the first one clapping and shouting. And, that's like what an outstanding behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, and someone like him who has been around, he understands that this is really how you move your way up, by showing kindness and respect. He is a positive, happy guy. He plays at 55 Bar, New York, and you can get right up and just take in the vibes, because not just the musical vibes, but his personality is very loving.
Yeah, the first night I ever went to New York, actually, I was just like walking. I don't think I even knew where I was. And I just saw this little blackboard. I didn't realize 55 Bar was a big deal, and the blackboard said like Mike Stun, $12. And I was like, what? Like that is that's a cheap gig in my opinion. And like, even like when he was playing, the waitresses would have to like squeeze past him, to like serve a drink. That it was just, it's got so much character, that part.
It really is. Yeah, you can. Yep, it is. That's funny.
So did you find it, if you were already doing gigs in New York and in Boston, does that make is that an easier transition when you start moving and, you've already got kind of one foot in both cities?
Yeah, in some ways. But, I was also starting over in a way. I'm also very tied into the theater world. I think that was kind of something that helped me a lot, was that I was playing theater shows, and I've done some, Broadway subbing and off Broadway stuff. And just like, I had two different streams of income, basically, my band leading and also the theater stuff that I was doing. And I think that kind of helped give me a little bit of a jump start when I got to New York. Because I was already doing that stuff, and I could, if work was slow in one area, I could always have something else going.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely ideal. And then the flute and the clarinet and the oboe, how did they come into the picture once you kind of getting on with the saxophone?
I picked them up along the way, like most of us, I guess. You figure out, hey, the flute kind of, it kind of feels like a saxophone, only I'm holding it up to my lips, and it's like kind of like the fingerings are kind of similar, and I just made some connections. I took some lessons when I was in college on various other instruments, and and I just realized that, okay, all right, if you're going to make a living at this, you got to double. You just have to do the doubling. And then even oboe has now become part of the doubling thing, which is, I do a little bit I don't do a lot of oboe, but when it comes up, I do it. And, it's just something I guess I, like all of us, picked it up along the way.
Nice. Yeah. No, that is what it is, isn't it? Like, sort of slowly collect them as you go along.
Yeah, but I tell you, it's as you know, it's very challenging. It is not easy. People have said, "Oh, it sounds easy. You make it look easy," and it's not easy in any way. And even when I'm really in my zone, I still have to work at it. Blowing on the alto for 30 minutes on a gig, and then all of a sudden grabbing a flute or a piccolo is not a natural thing for our face.
No, so that's a great way to put it.
I mean, it's just not. So, you just figure out what works. You make a lot of mistakes. Play with people who can support you. And when I was learning flute, I played with a friend, a folk artist named Andrew Cloninger, great folk musician. And he was, a non-threatening person that I could just work out my flute playing with on his gigs.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. And it's a hard one. I mean, the flute, especially playing, if you're not used to it, I don't think any amount of personal practice can prepare you for how it's going to feel to play that in front of an audience. Because it doesn't have a reed. You don't have the feeling of the resistance,
Oh, right. You lose all your air and you want to pass out, and it can be an absolute mess. This is funny. I was subbing on a Broadway show called Something Rotten. It's a really funny show. It's not playing anymore, but I was subbing, and the opening, most of the show was clarinet and sax, and some flute. But the opening, the two instruments that I had to open the show with, the first instrument was piccolo, and then recorder, which, this is going to sound funny, but I didn't actually learn recorder when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of just had it around the house. I just played a little bit, but that was actually the first. It was like a recorder solo at the beginning of the show. It's a kind of it was like Renaissance music, the music that we were doing. And talk about not only physically challenging to play those two instruments, but it's mentally challenging, because the night before, I remember this, the night before I was playing a club date with my band, all saxophone, and completely different type of music. And then, but speaking to audiences, the audience doesn't really care if I was what I was doing the night before, or what I was doing that morning, or what I ate for breakfast, or anything. They just want to hear, well, what are you going to do right now? I bought my ticket. Let's hear some music. And that's challenging as a musician, to bring them what's needed to the situation. It's difficult.
Yes. Yeah. Horrible. Recorder solo does sound absolutely brutal.
It was brutal.
I love that word.
Yeah.
So how did the Ronnie's thing? Have you played at Ronnie's before?
I have not. I have
Ah,
not.
nice. That would be
We
exciting.
yeah, we've been in touch with them. I've done some touring as a sideman around Europe and just getting to know venues. And so I was writing with Nick and a few other people at Ronnie Scott's, and just talking about my schedule and scheduling. And he said if there was a group that they could pair us up with, where we could open a show or do something there, that he would get in touch. And then so about a month ago, he wrote me, and so we're really excited. It should be fun. I think we're gonna do, when we're in town, we'll probably do a few media things while we're there, and then we're doing 2 nights, just one opening set, and then we're back to New York, because actually that week we're going to be doing some recording and some other stuff. Are working on the next album, which is funny because we're just literally just rolling out this current CD, and I'm already thinking about the next one.
Yeah, amazing.
So.
So the album is released already, but it's
Yes.
like London release. Is that right?
You got it. So we did a release at the Blue Note in New York. We did a release in Los Angeles at Herbert's Vibrato Club, which is a great club in LA. So we'll do Ronnie Scott's, and then I think we're doing a few more European dates maybe next year. I'm a big believer in, every show can be the album release until if it's new, so we are, and to many people it is new. So even though it's been out for about a year, but it's all new,
Yeah, and this is the first time an audience over here is going to have the chance to hear it and see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm excited, and I feel like I have gotten to know a lot of the London people. I have had London groups who have come over to New York, who I've been able to help find some work. And some of the writers in London, Bruce Lindsay at the Jazz Journal, Sammy Stein, she's a great freelance writer. So I feel like I've got some cool friendships with some London people. So I'm excited to get over there.
Yeah, great, man. It'll be amazing to have you, and for you being a part of the London Jazz Festival as well. So let's finish with let's check out some of your, actually, for something you say you don't do that much, this oboe playing sounds pretty amazing. On this is, I'm going to play Inside Our Pizza Oven.
Oh yes.
Is there anything you want to add to this before I hit the play button?
No, but it reminds me of Pizza Express, and I hope that they are doing okay, because I know they've been having trouble.
Do you know what? That is actually terrifying. Because
it is.
We don't have enough venues already, so
it is. Is there any update on that? I know they're struggling.
Well, as far as I can tell, there's a crippling amount of debt, which is probably not a good thing for. I mean, having a jazz venue, I feel like people often undervalue the cultural value of the things. When a board meeting comes together, are they really going to appreciate like the immense cultural value that the Pizza Express Jazz Club has brought to London? Because I hope so, because it's huge, But if you look at numbers, I don't know. I don't tend to, like you said, when you see these things from both points of view, and that clubs have got to make money, and that Pizza Express Club have done it in a way where I've never felt like they've kind of sold their soul for the highest bidder,
Right.
Without them, we've kind of got
so they're
and,
in debt. That's their big problem. They're just in debt,
there's
right?
Just a whopping sum of debt. So I think they're owned by a Chinese company, something. I should probably know more about this than I do. But I was thinking about it. Without it, you've got like, I don't know. It's just a very big, important flagship venue in town. So
yeah,
you're right. It's like you say, we live in such a small world and a small community, and the jazz communities in every city, they survive because of everyone's passion.
Right.
There's not money that keeps it going, because there's really not very much of it. But
right. But I tell you, I'm an optimist, and either they're going to make it, which is amazing, or new venues will come in, new things will happen. And I'm always, I mean, I'm very active on Twitter. I'm always trying to highlight the new and incredible venues that are popping up all over the world. So there's so many good things that are happening. So, here's to positive thinking,
Yes, I love that.
Yep.
All right. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the Jazz Podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Here's Inside Our Pizza Oven.